Today on Spotlight on the Arts, artist Dave Carter from Cape Girardeau, Missouri. Please join me in welcoming multi-talented artist Dave Carter of Cape Girardeau, Missouri, here on JCTV Spotlight on the Arts. Dave, if I may call you by your first name, please tell us a little bit about you and the highlights of your life that best describe Dave Carter.
Well, it's a pleasure and an honor to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Rick. I received a lot of encouragement throughout my lifetime. I had a retired elementary school teacher next door when I was growing up who always had lots of art supplies, things to work with, and she had an open door policy. I could come anytime, day or night. A lot of books and a lot of interesting items in her home. In fourth grade, I had a teacher inform the class that I was one of the class artists, which was a surprise because I hadn't thought of myself that way. In junior high school, I found out that I could work with pastels and look at a still life and reproduce it in a, at the time we'd call it a realistic fashion, but a representational fashion. That was another surprise.
Oh, I see.
And then at 16 or 17, I started working with oil paints and fell in love with oil paints.
Well, I should ask next then, what was the moment that you was basically first inspired, not only by the school teacher, the neighbor, or what have you, stepping outside of an assignment type? When was you really first inspired that you wanted to share your art, your feelings inside? What moment turned your life into sharing?
Well, all through high school, junior high and high school, I took math and science, and I was convinced I was a math and science guy. And then my senior year in high school, I realized I was more interested in writing and music, visual arts, that kind of thing, and that I was actually more interested in the people who were interested in those things. Developed a lot of new friends who were musically inclined and artistically inclined. I was an English major for a number of years, and then became a dual major between English and visual art, and then eventually became interested in just art. But part of the process was a first trip to St. Louis Art Museum. And I saw a large Dutch master still life, very large.
Oh, wow.
Dutch master still life. And in those days, you could get right up on the canvas. You know, they didn't
Awesome.
come and take you away. And I was looking at this grape that was depicted, and I was thinking, well, I could paint that, you know, and a little arrogance there. Then also in the museum was the largest global traveling exhibit of Van Gogh's artwork. There were 300 pieces, and I was honored to get to go to see that show. The painting of his bedroom
I see.
it was there, and the other artwork I enjoyed, but this piece, I had a transcendental experience with it, literally.
Oh, I see.
I went somewhere. And I remember kind of coming out of that and looking at it and going, what in the world, just took place or whatever. And I realized that art could be more than just successfully reproducing visually something that's actually there, that grape,
Yes.
that art could actually communicate something beyond just the visual.
And from that moment, you decided to share what's on the inside. That's someone you felt like you should be sharing, I guess. Yes, I repeat myself, with viewers, hoping that they somehow, all the way, all look at art, your piece, each piece of art, basically have a different feeling when we see it, and one's feeling is totally different sometimes of what someone else, or the eye of the beholder. But I guess at that point you decided it might be a good time to reach in and pull out, see if I can get the same effect, maybe the same message across some grapes to Van Gogh to your own.
I would say that took a number of years.
I see.
A lot of the initial impetus to paint was just frankly to please others. You know, do a portrait for a girlfriend, you know, or somebody would want a painting of their field, you know, with hay bales in it. So I would do that, and I enjoyed the process. I physically enjoy painting. So it was never a cruel task or just an assignment or whatever, because I really enjoy the process of doing it. And I would say it took a number of years really before I started trying to communicate more in internal aspects of existence. It was pretty superficial for me.
Now we'll be sharing some of your works as we discussed. They'll be edited into the program as we talk more about some of those inspirational paintings, our art pieces, and we'll get more into Dave's own philosophy or feelings on what the aspects of his artwork. There's more to it. I would like to ask you, well, what are your favorite mediums for those artist viewers? What are your favorite mediums that you love to work with?
Well, I have an extensive background in pastels, watercolor, charcoal, and just graphite pencils and graphite sticks. But oils have always been my favorite. Again, starting at 15 or 16.
Mine too.
There's something about the quality of them, the purity of color, the opaqueness,
the magic of blend.
the magic. You know, even the smell of them. You know,
And
which
the
some
smell,
people find
yes.
oppressive. You know, but
I understand that.
it's part of the magic or whatever on that. Is this a time to talk about auto accident?
Well, I
Or
would like to bring that up in the second segment.
Okay, we'll do that
because
then.
that's really going into the in-depths of how an artist steps back up and redefines himself as an artist. And that's going to be very interesting, so I want to ask you folks to stay tuned in for that. Well, your subject matter, you're noted right now for the Mills of Missouri and other works, but what are your favorite subject matters, shall we say?
It used to be almost exclusively portraits, and if I did a landscape, it would have a person in it, or if it was buildings, there would be a person somewhere in the composition. So things were very centered on people. I stopped painting for 16 years, and then I started again in 2008. I love San Diego. I love the southwest coast area, Southern California. My wife and I made a trip. I had gone completely digital, so I took 2,000 photos literally. Came back and painted seascapes and Old Town San Diego and all those kinds of things for 3 or 4 years, almost exclusively San Diego subjects. If you live in the Midwest, I think that all of the coasts serve as a kind of fantasy escapism,
Yes.
And you can almost hear the waves crashing on the rocks and the seagulls and things.
Well, all of your works, as I've reviewed on your website, etc., all have a meaning, and I get a lot of inspiration just looking at them. And so they really define you somewhat as an artist, probably as an individual. And so I invite everyone to go to your website, which we'll mention in a little bit, and we'll also go ahead and throw some of those up into the program as the edit.
Well, and I would say that in 2014 we moved to southeast Missouri from northeast Missouri, and it's a totally different geographic area. Geologically, there are just wonders there.
Yes.
There were a whole new types of birds and insects. It's just a different world.
Yes.
And so where before I had to go to the coast to get some sense of the exotic.
Yes.
All I had to do was walk outside. I have photographs of 5 different kinds of woodpeckers. Well, prior to that, I had seen one woodpecker in my life, and his name was Woody.
Oh, yes, Woody Woodpecker.
Yeah, when I was a kid.
Yes.
Johnson Shut-ins, Elephant
Yes.
Rocks,
Elephant
Mingo Swamp, all these areas were very new to me, and so it's been really exciting over the last 4 years to devote almost exclusively to subject matters that are Southeast Missouri oriented or South Missouri generally oriented.
And that opened a new canvas for you.
Absolutely.
And we're actually able now to see it on exhibit and also here, and naturally on Spotlight on the Arts. So I'm really thankful for Dave making the trip along with his wife, Sally, up to visit with us here on JCTV. Well, Dave, we must take a break, so please hang with me. When we return, artist Dave Carter will share more about his exciting life and experiences as an artist, instructor, and more. So stay with me. We'll be right back.
Now look at this guy. What are you gonna do, kid? Go home. It's hopeless. Yeah.
Welcome back to Spotlight on the Arts. I'm with artist Dave Carter out of Cape Girardeau, Missouri. Welcome back, Dave, to the second portion.
Thank you.
Well, in the past months, I've gotten to know you as an associate in the world of arts. Now with the feeling of a personal friend, I can call friend. I've been enlightened by your knowledge and experiences, life experiences, the honed skills and discussion over Mexican and Chinese foods here recently we've got to enjoy. Great. There's a lot of good information. I ask you to share a more intimate look into your theory of life as an artist, instructor of art, and one who has recovered many obstacles to finally reach a level as many art lovers now identify with as the artist Dave Carter here in this year of 2018. So please describe to the viewers how you began as an artist, your past take, and then finally you had a life-changing experience, and that seemed to really turn things around for you in another direction, I guess, or the same direction but with more depth and foundation. So give us a little idea of what it is like to recover.
Well, if you follow these things, it's popular in visual art to talk about right brain, left brain.
Yes.
And left brain is the more technical, precise part of the brain, theoretically. Right brain is more creative, loose, a little more driven by inspiration and intuitiveness. And I was always a very left brain person. As I'd said earlier, I was a math science guy all the way up to senior year. And I approached art from a very technical standpoint. I preferred drawing, and my idea of a real piece of artwork was something that was very carefully and accurately rendered.
Yes.
I didn't have any involvement in color. Art teachers would talk about, I'd show them a painting, and they'd say, it's a very nice drawing. And I'd say, well, no, it's a painting. And they'd say, no, it's a drawing. And I'd say, well, I used oil paint. And they said, so you drew with oil paint.
Yes.
And I didn't understand for many years what they were talking about. No involvement in color. It was all about line and shape instead of hues. Then in 1984, I was in an auto accident. I came up over a hill, and there were two cars coming at me, and that's all I remember at the time until I came to later. As a result of that, I had slight to moderate brain damage, is how it was described. And I couldn't talk well, I stuttered, I drooled, couldn't walk right, just
Sure.
those kinds of things. Memory was shot, had seizures, all that kind of thing. And within probably 6 months after that wreck, I started painting again. And instead of being, the injury impact was the left temporal lobe, and it apparently loosened things up, shall we say.
I see.
And immediately I started painting. Things couldn't be bright enough. And I was putting phthalo yellow-green next to cadmium red light, which is just like, oh my
like
land.
a stop sign.
Yeah, and worse or something.
Oh my.
But I couldn't get colors intense enough, and it was very stimulating. I would sit and look at these things, and in a kind of ironic way, it was almost relaxing. Just to see these really strident colors. And as time went on, did go through a long period of recovery. I met my wife at the worst point of that, and she was and is instrumental in keeping me healthy and going.
Yes.
She got me back in college in 90. I finished a BFA in 92 from Truman State University in Kirksville. And I had, that's the time when I started wanting to express more.
Oh, I see.
Than just, that's why I was asking earlier, to express more than just a careful rendering.
Yes.
Where I started becoming interested in trying to express some kind of inner emotion.
Yes.
At 19, I decided I didn't want to produce ugly things. I went through a juvenile time of painting evil stuff or whatever.
I see.
And at 19, I went, the world's got enough of that in it. I want to paint pretty pictures.
You're right.
And I hope I've produced pretty pictures
I
ever
think
since.
you've got it well covered from my viewpoint anyway. So,
so I've started I started painting again in 2008, and almost immediately started painting in two directions. One is rendering, but with in a more traditional naturalistic approach. Excuse me, but it's they're more colorful. There is involvement with color and brush strokes and kind of thing.
Oh, yes.
More the evidence of the artist, if you will. And then the other direction is more contemporary, and it's much more expressionistic. It looks they're much more appropriate, say, in an urban gallery or something like that.
yes. On the contemporary side, or
Right.
what have you.
And they're abstracted. They still begin with natural subjects, but then they go the more abstracted route.
Yes. Now, I've taken a class of yours and listened to your lecture, and you've got a theory that you use, and again, I recognize maybe sort of an engineering aspect that you term now, engineering aspect being so tight, as they call it sometimes, but now you've taken that and been expanded upon it to make it more realistic, let's say, and acceptable by many viewers, by putting more of a human philosophical or what have you feeling, I guess, to your painting. So describe briefly, if you can, your use of the triad, where you identify not only the setup of the painting, but also in your color formula, how people basically plan and develop a project. Am I on the right track?
Pretty much. Part of the recovery process that I was describing when I went back to college after the accident, I had to develop a new learning technique.
Oh, I see.
Before I had an extremely good memory. And so I could just simply read material and just keep piling more and more material on top of each other. After the accident, my memory is not so good, shall we say. And I have to have a system for remembering things. So I began with the premise that we're trichotomous, we're three-part people. We have a body, obviously, material existence. We have a mind, rational existence. And then I absolutely believe we have a spiritual or metaphysical existence. And that all three are essentially equal in terms of reality, but they have a totally different substance, form, and function.
Right.
Well, if that's true, then those are the only three ways that we can receive information. It has to be received either from the material world through rational existence or through a metaphysical existence. And then the other problem was there have to be conduits between each of those.
Connectors.
Yeah, connectors, because they, in terms of substance, form, and function, they are radically different from each other.
Yes.
Between material existence or our body and our mind is fairly simple. It's our senses. You know, everything we know about the world out here, we receive through our five senses. And then there are emotions attached to that, and some sense of understanding of things. Between the rational self, the mind self, and the metaphysical or spirit, I decided was the intellect, because part of intellect is creativity and intuitiveness.
Sure.
Well, by definition, then, that really doesn't come through material existence. You know, for something to be intuitive has to come from somewhere else. So it has to be a part of that metaphysical, if you will.
So if I may, and hang on to that, this is where we tie into, at some point in this human life, there seems to be a basis or continuity between the person and what he wishes to experience or share. And we can go back, as you stated in your classes, we go clear back to the handprints on the cave people.
Yep.
Where did that come from? Every artist that I seem to run into seems to have, in my opinion, and we've discussed this, it's almost born with the gene to be an artist. But it seems like there's some person in that cave that decided at some point to put the handprint, or the antelope, or the buffalo, or the what have you, mastodon, I guess it goes. So Dave and I have discussed this, and where does that come from? I'll ask you as a viewer, where does that come from? From the gene, or what have you? So.
Now, do you want a serious answer or my favorite answer?
Well, both.
Okay. Well, my favorite answer is a guy was sitting there one night after dinner looking at the wall, 6, 10, 30,000 years ago, however long, and he noticed that there was a crack in the rock, and it kind of reminded him of say, the horse's head, or something like that. And that's a huge leap of abstraction. I mean, that's enormous. Something that two things are totally unrelated, and yet you relate them. You draw that parallel. That's abstraction. And then another huge leap took place when he said, if I would do this, like draw an extra line or something, it would look even more like a horse. So that's another enormous leap. I think the real leap came, though, when he realized that he could throw rocks and sticks at it and convince people that he was helping the hunt for the next day. Okay, and they would go out, and he told them, look, I'm willing to sacrifice my time out there with you fellows, and I'll stay here, with the women, and I'll keep throwing rocks at this to help ensure that you get a good hunt. And all I'm asking is 10% of the meat.
Oh, I see. Yes.
That's the real leap.
That's the real leap.
Yeah, that's the artist, a shaman, teacher, shoe salesman.
A purpose, having a purpose.
Having a purpose.
And describe it somehow on the wall through his art.
Now, another serious aspect, that's the beginning of science, that's the beginning of communication. That's the beginning of art itself. That's the beginning of magic. I mean,
psychologically speaking, or what have you, that rounds it up. That's true. Well, we're getting close to short on time, and I don't want to get away from. You have a lot of things going on right now with your exhibits, your speaking engagements, and teaching engagements. Are there any favorite pieces that you would like to direct our viewers to at this time on exhibit, and what those favorites are? And even if you want to let us know your website address in this delivery, that would be excellent too, where people can get a hold of you for commission work or what have you.
Well, I don't have a website per se because I wouldn't take care of it, but I do have a Facebook page that's called Dave's Studio Visual Art Services. Okay. And you've got to put the Visual Art Services, or you wind up with photography studios and beauticians and all kinds of things. This time of year, most of the shows start coming home, and then they start out again in January. Mills of South Missouri We'll be in Cape Girardeau County History Museum in Jackson, Missouri, January, February.
Okay.
March goes to Poplar Bluff, April, Ellington, Missouri, June, Hannibal, and July, August, Sedalia. And then there's some other dates we're discussing for later, but.
And you'll keep them updated and notified as they go to your
Yes.
Facebook page.
Yep.
Well, excellent. Well, Dave, it's difficult to cover everything as you see in 30 minutes, but we have covered some really great basis for our art enthusiasts to really look at art in a different fashion than how you see it through the eyes of Dave Carter. So I extend you to the invitation to return and maybe enlighten us even more on your favorite topic at that time. So on behalf of myself and JCTV, I want to thank you for sharing with us here on Spotlight on the Arts today.
Well, Jerry, thank you so much. It's been an honor.
All right, thank you, sir. Well, my next featured guest here on Spotlight on the Arts will be Karen Glines of St. Louis, Missouri, who will represent, or actually present, a look at the artist Billy O. O'Donnell. And you all have probably heard of Billy O. O'Donnell, known for his book, Painting Missouri. So that'll be coming up. That taping is scheduled for December 5th next month. Also on that day, I will interview Dan Woodward of Orala, Missouri, for a taping of Spotlight on the Arts, number 19. Dan is known for his commission work depicting the Civil War battles west of the Mississippi River. Very historical speaking. That initial interview is inadvertently lost in the computer system, so we'll be taping also that retaping. So thank you, JCTV producer Gloria and Lowen crew, and thank you, our viewers, for sticking with us and sharing our world of art here on JCTV. Look for more Mid-Missouri art news. Spotlight on the Arts right here at JCTV. And don't forget YouTube. So I'm Rick J saying, see you next time.